I've never been good at talking about this. Even now, as I sit here alone with the lights off, I can feel my throat tightening. But if I don't tell someone, I'm afraid I'll go insane. It all began a few weeks ago. I live in a small, run-down neighborhood, the kind where the streetlights flicker more than they shine, and the air always smells faintly of rust and mildew. Nights here are quiet, too quiet. There's barely any traffic after 9 p.m., and most of the neighbors keep to themselves. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was pacing back and forth in my living room when I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping echoing from somewhere outside. It wasn't random, like a branch hitting a window. No, it had timing, almost like music. Curious and a little unsettled, I peeked through my curtains. At first, I saw nothing but the usual dim glow of the far-off street lamp. But then, from the alley across the street, a figure emerged. An old woman, hunched but strangely graceful. She was wearing a tattered dress that fluttered around her legs as she danced. Yes, danced. Her arms swayed slowly, almost elegantly, as she twirled in the narrow alley, illuminated by that single flickering streetlight. There was no music playing, yet her movements matched a rhythm I could almost feel in my bones. I should have been disturbed, but at first, I just watched, fascinated. Then she stopped, mid-motion. Her head snapped in my direction so fast, I swore I heard her neck crack. Even from that distance, I could see the glint of her eyes, wide and unblinking, locked on me. My heart froze. I yanked the curtain shut and stumbled back, barely breathing. For a few minutes, I just stood there, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe she was just a harmless, eccentric old lady. But then, the tapping began again. Only this time, it was closer, directly beneath my window. Slow, deliberate steps, like the beat of a metronome. Tap, tap, tap. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I forced myself to peek again, just for a split second. The alley was empty, completely empty. I didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, I convinced myself it had been some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But when I went outside to grab my mail, I noticed something strange near the edge of my driveway. Footprints. Small, bare, and sunken deep into the mud. They weren't heading toward the street. They were leading directly to my front door and stopping there. That was the moment the unease became terror. I couldn't shake the image of her twisted silhouette under that yellow streetlight, frozen mid-dance, staring straight at me. And later that evening, I'd learned that my nightmare was only just beginning. I tried to act like nothing had happened. I went about my day pretending those footprints weren't burned into my memory. But as night fell again, I couldn't keep my hands from trembling. I triple-locked the doors and shut every curtain in the house, leaving only a dim lamp on in the living room. Around 11 p.m., just as my heartbeat began to settle, the sound returned. Tap, tap, tap. This time it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house. I froze, clutching the edge of the couch as my breath caught in my throat. The steps were slow, deliberate, and seemed to come from the hallway near my bedroom. For a few terrifying seconds, I convinced myself it was just the house settling, until I heard it again. Louder, closer, tap, tap, tap. The rhythm was unmistakable. The same rhythm I'd heard when she danced in the alley. It was her. I grabbed a kitchen knife and tiptoed toward the hallway, my pulse pounding in my ears. The house was suffocatingly silent except for that infernal tapping, which now seemed to echo inside my skull. The air felt heavy, humid, almost alive. When I reached the corner, I held my breath and peeked around. Nothing. Just the dark, narrow hallway leading to my bedroom. I almost laughed at myself, a shaky, nervous laugh, until I noticed something. The door to my bedroom, which I had left wide open, was now closed. My vision blurred as my chest tightened. I took one trembling step forward, and the moment my foot touched the floor, the tapping stopped. The silence that followed was so complete it felt like the world had ceased to exist. Then, from behind the door, I heard it. A whispery, raspy hum, like an old woman softly singing to herself. That was enough for me. I ran. I didn't stop to grab anything. Not my phone, not my wallet. I just bolted out the front door and into the cold night air, gasping like I'd been underwater for too long. As I reached the street, I looked back at my house. The front window blinds had been drawn slightly apart, and through the small gap, I saw her silhouette standing perfectly still, arms stretched outward, like she was inviting me to dance. I didn't return until the next morning, accompanied by a neighbor I trusted. The house was quiet, normal, no sign of forced entry, but my bedroom door, it was hanging off its hinges, like someone had ripped it open with inhuman strength. My neighbor suggested I call the police, but I didn't. How could I explain this without sounding insane? That evening, desperate for answers, I decided to walk to the alley where I'd first seen her. The sun was setting, painting the sky a sickly orange as I approached. The moment I stepped into the alley, a smell hit me. Rot. Old, wet rot, like something dead had been left to fester for years. And then I saw them. Photographs. Dozens of faded, water-damaged photographs scattered across the ground. Every single one showed the same woman, the same old lady, dancing in that very alley. Some of the photos were decades old, judging by the cars and clothes. But what made my blood run cold was the last photo I picked up. It wasn't faded or damaged. It was perfectly clear, like it had been taken last night. And in it, she wasn't dancing. She was staring directly at the camera. Directly at me. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, was my house. I dropped the photo and stumbled backward, my heart pounding so violently I thought it would burst. That's when I heard it again, faint at first, then rising, surrounding me. Tap, 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 I spun around. At the end of the alley, beneath that flickering streetlight, she stood. Head tilted, arms stretched wide, mouth slowly curling into a grotesque toothless grin. This time, she wasn't dancing. She was waiting. I froze. My body wouldn't respond, like my brain had been unplugged from my limbs. The old woman stood perfectly still under that flickering light, her shadow stretching unnaturally long across the wet pavement. Her head twitched slightly, like she was trying to contain an overwhelming excitement. And then, she moved. Her foot slid forward in a slow, deliberate step, the sound of her bare skin slapping against the concrete sending shivers down my spine. Tap! She moved her other foot. Tap! The rhythm began again. But this time, I realized it wasn't just dancing, it was summoning. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused. It felt like the very air around me had thickened, weighing me down, trapping me in that alley with her. My vision started to blur at the edges, like I was slipping into some kind of trance. Her arms floated upward, bending unnaturally at the elbows until her hands hovered above her head. She began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, her silhouette a black blur against the sickly orange light. And that hum returned, low and guttural, like dozens of voices coming from her throat at once. Waltz with me. I don't know if she actually spoke or if the words simply appeared in my mind, but I heard them clearly, over and over. Waltz with me, waltz with me. Something inside me broke free. With a guttural scream, I turned and ran. I don't remember much after that, only fragments. The sound of my own ragged breathing, the feeling of my feet pounding against the pavement, and always, always behind me, that tapping. No matter how fast I ran, it never faded. It was as if she was right at my heels, barely a breath away. I burst through my front door and slammed it shut, locking every bolt, my chest heaving like I'd been drowning. For a moment, there was silence. Blessed, absolute silence. And then, tap, 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 directly on the other side of the door. I stumbled backward, collapsing against the wall as tears streamed down my face. The sound didn't grow louder or softer. It just stayed there, steady, patient. Like she knew I couldn't hide forever. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. The sun eventually rose, and the tapping stopped. When I finally worked up the courage to open the door, there was nothing there, nothing, except a single, muddy footprint. Small, bare, pointing into the house. I should have left right then, burned the place down, moved across the country, anything. But I didn't. I told myself it was over, that maybe she couldn't come in unless I let her. That night, I tried to stay awake. I sat in the living room, every light on, clutching the same kitchen knife I'd carried before. But exhaustion won. My eyelids grew heavy, my head nodding forward, and that's when I felt it, a cold hand brushing against my cheek. I snapped awake, heart pounding, but the room was empty, completely silent, until the hum began again. This time, it wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from behind me. I turned, and there she was, standing in the corner of the room, her shadow stretching unnaturally across the walls. Her grin was impossibly wide now, splitting her wrinkled face like a grotesque mask. Before I could scream, she lifted her arms, and I couldn't move. My feet began to slide across the floor against my will, perfectly in time with her rhythm. I realized with absolute horror that I wasn't just watching her dance anymore. I was part of the dance. As my body spun and twisted to her unseen melody, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. My mouth was moving. I was humming with her. I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke up, it was morning. The living room was spotless, no sign of her, no sign of struggle. But my feet were covered in mud, and there were new footprints leading out the front door. And now, every night, I hear it. The tapping, the humming. It's always just outside, waiting. I don't know how much longer I can fight it. But if you ever hear a slow, rhythmic tapping beneath your window at night, don't look, don't listen. And whatever you do, don't dance.